Hey guys, welcome to a new video from 10 Times. In this video, we will take a look at the top 10 most famous serial killers that have ever lived on this globe. Who are these serial killers and why did they become so famous? From the infamous Ted Bundy to the terrifying Jeffrey Dahmer. Lean back and get ready to learn more about the darkest sides of the human mind. On to the first in this list. Number 10. Ted Bundy. Theodore Robert Cowell, also known as Ted Bundy, is one of the most classic examples of a psychopathic serial killer. He was a rapist, murderer, kidnapper, and necrophiliac. Despite denying his involvement in the crimes for many years, he finally admitted to 30 murders between 1974 and 1978 just before he was executed in 1989. The true number of murders he committed is still unknown, but it is believed to be much higher. Bundy utilized his charm and charisma to win over his victims' trust. He often lured them into public areas by pretending to be injured or posing as an authority figure before overpowering them in a more secluded location. He frequently returned to the crime scenes to engage in sexual acts with the bodies, continuing until decomposition and scavenging made it impossible. He kept at least 12 of his victims' heads as mementos. Number 9. John Wayne Gacy, also known as the Killer Clown, committed at least 33 murders of teenage boys and younger men during his killing spree in Chicago, Illinois, USA, from 1972 to 1978. Gacy carried out all of his killings at his home in Norwood Park Township. He would lure his victims to his address under false pretenses and then murder them by suffocation or strangulation using a tourniquet, with the exception of his first victim who was stabbed to death. Gacy earned his nickname from his habit of dressing up as Pogo, a clown character, during his charity work at fundraisers, parades, and children's parties. Number 8. Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer, born in 1960 and died in 1994, was famously known as the Cannibal of Milwaukee for his involvement in the rape, murder, and dismemberment of 17 men and boys between 1978 and 1991. He engaged in necrophilia, cannibalism, and preservation of body parts, particularly skeletal remains. Although diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, he was deemed sane and legally responsible for his actions during his trial, which resulted in 15 life sentences. An additional conviction was added later for a murder in Ohio. Dahmer admitted to being compelled to kill and possessed by an endless desire to remain with his attractive male victims. He was beaten to death by a fellow inmate, Christopher Scarver, on November 28, 1994. Number 7. Aileen Wong. Aileen Carol Wuornos was born in Rochester, Michigan, USA, under the name Pittman, but later changed it to her mother's name. She went on a brief killing spree between 1989 and 1990, during which she shot and killed 7 men. Wuornos claimed that each of her victims had raped or attempted to rape her during her time working as a prostitute, framing her actions as self-defense. However, in a letter to the Florida Supreme Court seeking dismissal of all legal relief and following the suspension of her professional activities, Wuornos indicated that she was driven by hatred, leading her to kill again whenever she had the opportunity. Wuornos received the death penalty for 6 of the 7 murders and was executed by lethal injection in Florida on October 9, 2002. The 2003 movie Monster, starring Charlize Theron, depicts her story, for which Theron won an Academy Award. Number 6. Zodiac Killer. The unknown identity of the Zodiac Killer continues to be a mystery, even after his or her killing spree in Northern California, USA during the late 1960s and early 1970s. Zodiac targeted primarily young couples, killing 4 men and 3 women aged between 16 and 29. The name Zodiac was coined by the killer, who communicated his crimes through cryptic letters sent to local newspapers, particularly the Bay Area press. 4 cryptograms were included, but only 3 have been deciphered so far. The case remains open, with the most recent tip-off dating back to February 2014. A man named Louis Myers allegedly confessed to the murders to a tipster in 2001 before he passed away from cirrhosis of the liver. It is speculated that the killer's fixation on couples may have stemmed from a traumatic breakup. Number 5. Charles Manson. Charles Millis Manson gained notoriety as the leader of the Manson family, a commune he established in California, USA, during the late 1960s. Manson was convicted of conspiring to commit 7 brutal murders over 2 consecutive days. One of the victims was the famous actress Sharon Tate, who was then the pregnant wife of renowned director Roman Polanski. In addition to Tate and her unborn child, 4 other people were killed in her home. The following day, the LaBianca couple was also murdered by the family. Manson was a pure psychopath who believed that his actions were driving an apocalyptic race war, which he called Helter Skelter. This term was taken from the Beatles' song of the same name, whose lyrics he rewrote to suit his purpose. Manson is currently serving a life sentence at Corcoran State Prison. His death sentence was commuted in 1972. His actions have come to symbolize the dark side of the hippie movement. Number 4. Jack the Ripper. The infamous legend of Jack the Ripper continues to captivate people's imaginations, even after 130 years since he stalked the shadows of Victorian London. The murders are shrouded in mystery, and since the killer was never caught, nothing has been confirmed. However, it is known that he brutally killed at least 5 women by disemboweling and leaving them for dead on the streets of London in 1888. Jack the Ripper was not content with just spilling the blood of his innocent victims. He also taunted the London police with letters and postcards, one of which contained the extracted kidney of one of his victims. Although the first 4 victims were stabbed and mutilated within minutes, his 5th and final victim, Mary Jane Kelly, was destroyed beyond recognition, and the aftermath of the crime scene remains a disturbing image. Number 3. Ed Gaine. To compile a list of serial killers, it would be remiss not to mention Ed Gaine, the grave-robbing maniac whose gruesome acts inspired one of the most iconic horror villains of all time, Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Ed Gaine had an unhealthy obsession with his mother and lived with her in their farmhouse in Plainfield, Wisconsin until she passed away in 1949, at which point Gaine was already 40 years old. Afterward, he began raiding local cemeteries and exhuming the bodies of recently deceased women, which he then fashioned into various household items. However, robbing graves soon failed to satisfy Gaine's dark desires, so he began killing. He shot and murdered 2 local women, loaded their corpses into his truck, and took them back to his dilapidated house. Gaine became a suspect in the disappearance of local shop owner Bernice Wardens, and when police searched his home, they discovered some of the most disturbing creations ever seen. Inside Gaine's house, investigators found human bones, bowls made from skulls, mutilated genitalia, a lampshade made from human skin, clothes made from flayed skin, and much more. Gaine later confessed that his ultimate goal was to make a woman suit so that he could become his mother. The character Buffalo Bill from Silence of the Lambs was inspired by Ed Gaine's horrific acts of making furniture out of human skin. Gaine died in a mental hospital in 1984, but his legacy continues to haunt the backwoods of Plainfield. He remains one of the most notorious and prolific serial killers in American history. Number 2. Carl Panzram. The name Carl Panzram may not immediately come to mind when thinking about history's most notorious serial killers, but his inclusion on the list is well deserved. Unlike other infamous serial killers who had specific target victims, such as Bundy's young women, Gacy's teen boys, or Gaine's dead women, Panzram was indiscriminate in his killings. In his own words, Panzram claimed that he was so full of hate that he had no room for any other emotions. Born in Minnesota in 1889, Panzram led a wild life from a young age, hopping on trains and committing random acts of violence and burglary to get by. After being sexually assaulted and tortured by guards during his stints in prison, Panzram's desire for revenge became insatiable. He would lure American soldiers away from bars and kill them, as well as targeting boys as young as 11 whom he would sexually assault and strangle. While he was convicted of only 3 murders, he confessed to killing more than 20 people. Panzram hated humanity and often fantasized about committing mass murder. In prison, he reportedly told a guard, "I wish the whole world had one neck, and I had my hands around it." Number 1. Harold Shipman. We head back to Manchester, England, where a man known as Dr. Death terrorized the city for 28 years, taking a record-breaking number of lives. Harold Shipman, a seemingly ordinary doctor, was one of the most notorious serial killers of modern times in the UK. Despite his unassuming appearance, Shipman had a dark secret: he was responsible for the deaths of an unprecedented number of people. He would make house calls to elderly patients and administer deadly amounts of morphine, following in the footsteps of his own mother's death. Shipman's actions came to the attention of authorities when they realized that many of his patients were dying under his care. The tipping point occurred when the daughter of his last victim discovered that her mother had bequeathed a large sum of money to Dr. Shipman in her will. Further investigation uncovered that Shipman had been falsifying the medical records of his deceased patients to conceal his crimes. It is estimated that Shipman murdered at least 215 people, possibly even more than 260. He vehemently denied all accusations, but unfortunately, he took his secrets to the grave when he committed suicide in his prison cell in 2004. With each passing year, the number of active serial killers dwindles. That was the last of our list of the top 10 most famous serial killers in history. It's strange to think that there have been people who have done these things. Who did you find most terrifying? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe and like. Thanks in advance, and we'll see you at the next video.